Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's On Disciplining the Soul, Kitab Riyadat al-Nafs, translated by Timothy Winter Abdul Hakim Murad. We have reached the exposition of the requirements of aspirancy, the preliminaries to spiritual struggle, and the progressive induction of the aspirant in treading the path of discipline. This is on page 83. بيان شروط الإرادة ومقدمات المجاهد وتدرج المريد في سلوك سبيل الرياضة. Be it known unto you that the man who has in all certainty beheld the harvest of the afterlife with his heart must needs aspire to it, to being a murid, and must long for it and follow its ways, despising thereby the pleasures and delights which this world contains. For the man who has a bauble, like insignificant, like a small bead that they use for decoration, or an insignificant, but in this context it's a kharza versus a real gem, will lose all desire for it when he spies a precious gem. But even the precious gem is nothing but a stone. Different metals that will give it different colors, different shapes, different features, and will long to make an exchange. Lack of desire for the harvest of the afterlife. The harvest of the afterlife has been mentioned here more than once. And what do Muslim scholars say about the حرث الآخرة؟ من كان يريد حرث الآخرة نزل له في حرثه. حرث literally is plowing, like plowing the land to prepare for agriculture, to put the seeds to. So that's the beginning. Also, metaphorically, it has been used for intimate relationship. And that's also in the Quran. But the harth al-akhirah, we know that if you plow in this life, it's a piece of land. As I said, also metaphorically, the intimate relationship between spouses. It means that the for Imam Al-Qurtubi, he interprets this as you are exerting effort in this life, but you aim at the benefits of the hereafter. You'll be given both, he said. نعطيه الدنيا مع الآخرة. You'll be given this life along with the hereafter. If you aim at the hereafter, if you aim only at this life, that's exactly your share. That's تفسير القرطبي. تفسير الطبري, it's about, he referred basically to the increasing the good deed. You perform one good deed, you'll be rewarded tenfolds. And of course, you know that tenfolds is it could be up to 700 folds. Even more when you give charity. مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله كمثل حبة أنبتت 7 سنابل في كل سنبلة 100 حبة والله يضاعف لمن يشاء. Like the stalk of wheat So here we have 700 folds. والله يضاعف لمن يشاء. Still, it could be multiplied much more. And there is also reward that is beyond any quantification, like the reward for those who fast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is really a glimpse of really the notion of حرث الآخرة. So the why mentioning the bauble or the bead versus the real gem? If you see the hereafter, uh, you read about it, you just visualize that, and you are the certitude, and you seek the pleasure of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Then you would not be interested. You'd know the value of this life compared to the hereafter is. Is like that bead, like that bubble versus the a precious gem, and practically like any number that you can have in your head versus infinity. So lack of desire for the harvest of the afterlife and the meeting with God, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the outcome of a lack of faith in God and in the last day. Now, I do not mean by faith the discourse of the soul. This is still Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah speaking. And the movement made by the tongue when pronouncing the two testimonies, Shahadat la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, in a way which is devoid of any sincerity or single-heartedness. For this would be equivalent to believing that the jinn were better than the bauble while knowing its name alone and not its reality. Such a believer will not renounce the bauble, having grown accustomed to it, and will harbor no passionate yearning for the gem. The obstacle which bars us from attaining is pretty much like, a parrot could basically utter the name of things. A baby could be trained to say the name of things without knowing really their nature, their real definition, their real function. The obstacle which bars us from attaining to God is therefore our lack of wayfaring, the suluk. And every suluk is a movement uh, in a certain direction. In this case, in the direction of the hereafter. In the hadith about Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, it uses the word salak. If Umar basically treads on the path salak, on a path, Satan would tread on a different path. He will avoid encountering Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Salik, maslak. And this in turn proceeds from a lack of aspirancy. If you are not in a state of suluk, which means you are really on the move. Suluk is not a state which you arrive at. It's a continuous basically movement in a specific direction on the sirat really. Idina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Every day we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times, minimum 17, of course. You may add 11, you may add the sunan, and you can go, of course, beyond this. And this intent proceeds from a lack of aspirancy, this being the result of an absence of faith, which is in turn the consequence of a lack of guides and of people who might remind one. Lack of guides. We talk about الدليل، المرشد، الدليل. ومهما كان المطلوب محجوبا. الهدى وسبب عدم الإيمان عدم الهدى. Within few lines it mentions also the الدليل, and elsewhere it could be also the murshid. And here we talk about someone who will tend to the affairs of the heart. It's not anymore, memorizing fatawa, which is still necessary. Jurisprudence, fiqh is important. You don't bypass fiqh, and you don't bypass the work of our scholars. Utmost respect for the work of the scholars, knowing that they have also differed at times about the interpretation of specific texts, whether it's the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If you do teach your children a specific school of jurisprudence, and at one point, just like while being uh, raised in with firm roots in a specific school, still being open and very respectful to the other schools. These are non-sectarian. They reflect understanding of those ulama. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them, all of them. Those who bypass the schools of jurisprudence, they are in fact establishing a new school. Think about it. They don't reach something new on their own. They will still basically imitate someone. So absence of faith, which is in turn the consequence of a lack of guides and of people who might remind one and who know about God subhanahu wa ta'ala and will lead one along the path to Him, who give men to realize the baseness and impermanence of this world and the great import and everlasting duration of the next. Mankind is in a state of heedlessness, having plunged into the desires of this world and fallen deep into slumber. And there is not a single scholar of the faith who is working to arouse it from this plight. And this is really amazing because this sentence is applicable to our, as if Imam Ghazali is speaking about our time, not his time. فالخلق غافلون قد انهمكوا في شهواتهم وغاصوا في رقدتهم وليس في علماء الدين ما ينبههم. This is it's not that there are no scholars, that there are no guides, that there are no. The idea is that there's a certain disintegration of the social order. There's a certain people are tilted towards this dunya. The lack of, in general, this is not overgeneralization, but in general, lack of ethics, morality, mannerism, etiquette, politeness, that is shaped by the Quran and the Sunnah. We don't talk about imported norms, we talk about our own. Should anyone happen to awake, he will find himself incapable of following the path, because of his ignorance. When he questions the scholars about it, he finds them to be far removed from it and disposed instead towards their own whims. Thus it is that weakness, inexperiency, ignorance of the path, and the self-interested discourses pronounced by the scholars are the causes of the present absence of wayfarers on the path of God subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنُطْقُ الْعُلَمَاء بِالْهَوَى, pronounced by the scholars. Al-hawa is basically Here translated that self-interested discourse. Of course, there is self-interest, but hawa, it means it's statements or utterances by scholars that are not based on the Quran and the Sunnah. Could be for egoistic reasons. Could be for because of uh, a moment of ignorance. It has been said about a specific. I was reading about Imam Al-Ghazali as the Mujaddid, the reviver, renewer, the reviver of the 5th century of the Islamic calendar, and there were those who obviously not happy with Imam al-Ghazali, and not with Imam al-Ghazali, but they're not happy with the Ash'arites, and if they're not happy with Ash'arites, the Ash'ari, they will not be happy with the Maturidis, and they wanted to present one of their own as the Mujaddid. And I started reading, uh, and obviously there is a serious problem. If it's a serious theological problem, because uh, he uh, declared theologically that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a jump because of it has been mentioned in the Quran, and this is absolutely uh, wrong side. Now the scholar who mentioned this, he said zallatu alim, so it's possible. Zal is a scholar's mistake. It's possible. It's possible. Zallatu alim. But I think that the presenting an alternative list of mujaddideen, I think it's a deliberate act. Subhanallah. Should anyone happen to awake, he will find himself incapable of following the path because of his ignorance. When he questions the scholars about it, he finds them to be far removed from it and disposed instead towards their own whims. How? Thus it is that weakness in aspirancy, ignorance of the path, and the self-interested discourses pronounced by the scholars are the causes of the present absence of wayfarers on the path of God. If the objective be veiled, the guide absent, worldly desire predominant, and the seeker heedless, then attaining unto him and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an impossibility. And the paths must needs fall into destitute. But should it happen that a man awake, either of his own accord or by virtue of the activity of another, and aspire to irada, aspire to the commerce وتجارتها أراد إرادة في حرث الآخرة, the harvest of the afterlife. وتجارتها, the order in the Arabic is the opposite, the other way around. It doesn't make much difference really. The commerce, tijara. Of course, don't think that we speak about commerce in the normal sense. It's basically you are investing in the hereafter. You exchange what you have for something that will be preserved, will be not only will be preserved, but that it will grow in the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will multiply it for you in the hereafter. It's that commerce that will save you on the day of judgment from painful torture. He should be aware that there are diverse requirements which must be observed at the outset of aspirancy, and that there exists a place of refuge and a fortress within which he must defend himself if he is to be safe from those highwaymen, قطاع الطرق, and those enemies who particularly they are not really interested in others, they are interested in you, the highwaymen. who would obstruct him, and likewise that there are duties which he must perform while on his journey without cease. The requirements of aspirancy, which must be observed, pertain to the lifting of the veil and the barrier which lies between one and the truth, al-haq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For mankind has been deprived of the truth by reason of a successive establishment of veils and the presence of a barrier on the path. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the meaning of which, and we have set a barrier before them and a barrier behind them, and have covered them so that they cannot see. And this is from Surah Yasin. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. If you would like to visualize an image of the both barriers, من بين أيديهم, the barrier is not far away from your chest. It's really you are sandwiched between these two barriers, sticking to you. There is no room for maneuver. This is the interpretation of Dr. Fadl Islam al-Ra'i, the Iraqi grammarian linguist, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his days and grant him health so that we may benefit more and more, inshallah, from him. Now, the barrier which lies between the aspirant and the truth is constituted of four things: wealth, status, that's ja, imitation, and sin. المال والجاه والمعصية والتقليد. The veil of wealth can be lifted only by divesting oneself of it so that no more than the necessary quantity thereof remains. And that's what Imam Al-Ghazali did. He distributed his wealth when he decided to cleanse his heart away from Baghdad, from the people who know him. He distributed the wealth. He kept just something, the bare necessity for his family. For as long as a man retains a single dirham, as one silver coin, to which his heart inclines, he will be tied to it and veiled from God. The veil of status, the jah, is only lifted by distancing oneself from such circumstances as reinforce it, and through modesty, a preference for obscurity, fleeing from things which might cause one's name to be mentioned, and doing things which repel the hearts of others. And that's exactly what Imam Ghazali did. He simply distanced himself from the context. In Arabic, بالبعد عن موضع الجاه. You need to distance. Literally, this is not a psychological distance. You need the psychological distance, but you need also to be away from the context. For people who recognize you. Remember Imam Al-Ghazali, his fame traveled way to places where he has never been during his lifetime, and within few years of his lifetime, his works were translated into other languages. But if you read in Arabic and you read وإيثار الخمول, because بالبعد وبإيثار الخمول وإيثار الخمول. الخمول here in slang, in Arabic slang, it became associated with laziness. No, that's not laziness at all. Al-Khumul is the antidote of fame. So you'd lead a life practically incognito. You don't want people to know who you are, and that's not impossible in your own town. It's impossible. So you need to travel somewhere where you are not known. And if you retain this idea in the back of your head, and if you read about Imam Al-Ghazali doing public activity in Damascus or Jerusalem or Hebron, or in Mecca, in Medina, 11 years, just think about it twice. He didn't. Like as Imam Al-Ghazali. Wallah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam. Because he was running away. He did not go back to teaching. Fakhr al-Mulk, son of Nizam al-Mulk, put pressure on him to go back to teaching. It was Nisabur, not even in Baghdad. But he didn't do it before consulting Arbab al-Qulub, lords of the hearts, meaning the Sufi masters. He did not make that decision practically on his own. And they assured him that he was now ready, in the sense of it's a different heart now. As for the veil of imitation, taqlid, this can only be removed by renouncing one's fanaticism for the school of thought and the school of jurisprudence, the madhab, to which one subscribes, whichever this may be, and by believing that there is no deity but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the emissary of God, with true faith, and by striving to render one's sincerity genuine by dismissing all objects of worship apart from God subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most powerful, such object being one's desire. Inshallah, we'll go back to the notion of Imam al Ghazali's openness towards other madhahib right at the very beginning, inshallah, of the next session. Until then, subhanakallah wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.